Okay, good morning and welcome back to our Parsha webcast. This week is the Parsha, the portion of Kedoshim. Kedoshim is in Exodus, chapter 19, and it's a very, there's a lot of mitzvahs that appear in this Parsha, and the name of the Parsha is Kedoshim because the Parsha opens up with the words where God tells the Jewish people, Kedoshim tiyu, I want you to be holy. Kedoshim means holy. What does holy mean? Holy means to be separated, to be elevated, to be removed somewhat from the mundane crassness of the world. And the first portion goes on to enumerate many mitzvahs that relate to all kinds of things, and actually the portion of Kedoshim is one of those portions that have the most mitzvahs in them. It's like, certain portions tell a story, certain portions are all about mitzvahs. This portion is almost every second verse is another mitzvah. And there's many mitzvahs in this portion. I want to zero in on one of them, which will lead us into some interesting topics on fundamental issues that I think every one of us should know. And I refer you to chapter 19, verse 35. And over here it says as follows. I'm going to read the verse in English and then we'll discuss. Do not falsify measurements, whether in length, weight, or volume. You must have an honest balance, honest weights, an honest dry measure, and an honest liquid measure. And he concludes, I am God your Lord, who took you out of Egypt. Safeguard my decrees and all my laws and keep them. I am God. Maimonides, so you understand, the mitzvah tells us that you have to have, when you have, in those days they used to measure, right? Came to the store and you bought flour, they would measure it on a scale, how much you're buying. How did they measure it? They would put one side a stone or a measure and on the other side the flour, and it would, once it balanced, you knew how much you had because you knew how much the measure was, right? The problem is some people were not honest. And they would have a measure, they'd tell you it's a little bit off, right? They would tell you it's a measure of a pound, let's say, and it was it was less than a pound. So you thought you're getting a pound of flour, you weren't getting a pound of flour. So it was false measures, a dishonest measure. The Torah says this is a very big sin and you're not allowed to have it. And you have to remember that I'm the God that took you out of Egypt. So don't violate this law. Now Maimonides, the medieval great sage, right? Moses Maimonides wrote in his book of law, he writes the following, that anyone that anyone that denies the mitzvah, the commandment of measures, is as if he denied the story of the Exodus from Egypt. And the reason he says that is, what's the correlation between Egypt and it? Because in this verse it says that don't violate the mitzvah of measures, have honest measures, and to remember that I took you out of Egypt. So the Torah makes that connection. So Rambam says, therefore, Maimonides says that if you if you deny the mitzvah of measurement, of honest measurements, it's as if you have denied the story of the Exodus from Egypt. And the obvious question is, what is the connection between this mitzvah, specifically, where the Torah makes the connection to the Exodus from Egypt, and Maimonides says that it's as if you denied the Exodus from Egypt over any other mitzvah. All the mitzvahs were given by God to the Jewish people following the Exodus from Egypt when they went to Mount Sinai. Why is this mitzvah more particularly associated with the exodus from Egypt and the denial of it than any other mitzvah? That's a good question. And it's right there in the Torah itself. We don't find that every mitzvah the Torah says you should keep this mitzvah and remember that I took you out of Egypt. It doesn't say that by all the 613 mitzvahs. By this one it does. Why? So, with the time that's left, I want to elaborate on this a little bit. Some give an interesting answer that the connection is that why are you cheating in your measurements? Because you want to gain a little extra money, a little extra this, a little extra that, right? To gain in a non-honest way some money from another person. That means you're denying that God is the one that controls our finances, how much you should have, how much you shouldn't have. You're denying divine providence. And therefore, what was the story of Egypt? The whole story of the Exodus from Egypt was a story of divine providence where God took care of the Jewish people. So when you are being dishonest in your measurements, you're basically denying that God is the one that's going to takes care of us, because you have to cheat and you have to this. So you're denying the divine providence that took place at Egypt as well. The problem with this answer is because that's true by every sin, when it says don't steal, because it's the same thing. If you're stealing from another person, you're denying his divine providence. So why doesn't it say by the commandment not to steal the same thing? And remember that you left Egypt, because every mitzvah, every sin dealing with dishonesty, you could say the same thing, that you're denying divine providence, and therefore it's as if you're denying the story of the Exodus, which is the most prominent story of divine providence. Why specifically by the measurements? So we need to have a better answer than that, correct? Okay. So I'll tell you, it's interesting that with regard to the measurement, the mitzvah by the sin of false measurements is not when someone comes to your store and he wants to buy oil or flour or whatever it is, and you use a false measurement, so now you've caused a loss by that person, because you cheated him and you didn't give him the right amount, the right measure. That's not the sin there. That's the sin of stealing. That's theft. Mm-hmm. What is the sin of false measurements? The sin of false measurements is not that you should not use it. You shouldn't even have it. You shouldn't make it, even if you're not going to use it. You're not even allowed to make such a thing, even if you're never going to use it, to put in your storage. You're not allowed to have false measurements in your possession. You're not allowed to make false measurements, let alone use them, not even have them. What's the difference? Why aren't you allowed? What's so terrible of having this false measure? If you're not going to use it, what's the problem? Or even before you use it, what's the issue? What could be the issue? The issue is, when you take a look at the full, what is a false measurement? When a person goes and steals, he breaks into someone else's house in the middle of the night, and he steals. So he's outright a thief. He's not pretending, or someone holds you up in the middle of the street and says, give me your money. He's not pretending to be honest. He's not pretending anything. He's outright stealing from you, and he's threatening you that if you don't give him your money, he's going to harm you. And that's it. It's a very simple act. But when you have the false measurements, this is what, if you think about it psychologically, what is he doing? He has a measure. What is the reason he makes a measurement?
Deceival.
He's making a measurement because when you come into his store to shop and buy goods, you have to have a measure to see how much should be. But the whole purpose of a measurement is that the person who comes into your store should see that the seller is an honest person. He has a pound measurement, 2 pounds measurement, so that you're paying for what you're getting.
Comparing.
Well, but
Something compared with the weight or what he's
exactly.
getting.
But what's the purpose of the measurement?
To prove that he's
To
honest.
prove that you're honest. That's what the whole idea of a measurement is. That when someone comes into your store and says, "I need a pound of flour," you say, "Here's a bag. Here's a pound." Maybe it's not a pound.
But some people, they know. Oh,
But
equivalent.
1 second. But what happens if it's not a pound? So the store owner says, "No, I have a measurement.
Let me
I'm going
prove
to
you."
prove to you that I'm honest, and what I'm giving you is a pound." So he puts it on the scale, and he has his weight of a pound, and he puts the flour on the pound. Now you know that he's honest. But what happens if this measurement itself is not honest? He's fooling you. In other words, a double of it. He's presenting himself to be honest, but at the same time, he's not honest. You understand?
A
Absolutely.
double lie.
It's an even worse lie. This thief that holds you up in the middle of the street, he's not fooling you. He's not pretending. He's outright evil, and he's telling you he's outright evil. Over here, he's fooling you. He says, "I'm honest. I'm not just giving you a bag of flour and telling you here's a pound. I'm showing you that it's a pound by putting it on the scale and putting my measurement." But you're not. It's not a pound. He's showing that he's honest, but he's not really honest. That takes an even worse. If you think about it, it's a corrupt
Individual.
character, a corrupt character trait, a very bad one.
And you said
Now-
this is in Exodus 19?
Not Exodus, Leviticus. Did I say
Oh,
Exodus?
you said
I'm sorry.
Exodus. Yes.
I'm sorry. It's
You lost
Leviticus.
it. Leviticus
19.
19.
Yeah. Verse 35 and 36. So this is an added deficiency in the person that does such an act. It's one thing to be dishonest, and you're not fooling anyone with your dishonesty. Over here, you're showing that you're honest. It's like, when you have courts, and you have a corrupt court system. What's the court there for?
Justice.
To administer justice. If the very court that's there to administer justice is corrupt, taking envelopes under the table, if the judge is taking out, it's a greater corruption. It's worse than stealing, because he's taking the institution of justice, which is there to present to make the people believe that they have who to rely upon, and there alone you're stealing, and over there you're underhanded, you're taking away, you're corrupting the justice. That's the same thing over here. The measurements are there to show honesty and to pretend as if you're honest, but in the same act you're stealing. So that's even worse, and that's why even having it is wrong, because that's the beginning of all stealing. When you pretend that's the beginning of all trouble. Now, what's the connection between this? In other words, it shows a very flawed character trait. A very flawed character in the person that does this. In other words, I want to sum this up, the part of the measurements. The problem over here is not that you're stealing. Obviously stealing, everyone knows you're not allowed to steal. We're talking about even before, what the Torah is trying to tell a Jew over here is not don't steal. There's a lot of mitzvahs before and after about not stealing. Over here goes a step further. It tells you how to be before you steal. Don't even
Think about it.
have anything. Don't pretend. It's talking more to the character of the person than to. It's not about causing someone else financial loss. That's not what this mitzvah is about. This mitzvah is not here to tell us you're not allowed to cause someone else financial loss unjustly. That we know. They signal, don't steal, don't. There's a lot of mitzvahs that tell us don't cause someone else financial loss. This mitzvah is not about someone else, it's about you. You shouldn't have a heart that is corrupt, that's fooling people, pretending one thing and you're something else. That's what this is about. It's more about the person it's more about the character trait than the act of making someone else lose money. And this is the connection to Egypt, and this is very interesting. If you read the Haggadah on Pesach, we just came from Pesach. In one section of the Haggadah, it says over there, how wonderful God is, that he kept his promise. What did Hashem tell Abraham when he made the covenant with him?
Like a great nation.
He said that your children and descendants will be enslaved by a foreign nation, Egypt of course, and when the 400 years is up, but they'll be there for 400 years, and then they will be redeemed, they will be taken out with great wealth, right? And we say in the Haggadah how good God was, that he kept his promise. He even did it before. He took us out 190 years earlier. We were only there for 210 years. So the question now is, the great commentators all ask, how could you punish Egypt? If God is the one that already decreed that the Jewish people should be enslaved in Egypt, so what do you want from the Egyptians? All they did was fulfill God's promise, God's decree. So what do you want from the Egyptians? What did they do wrong? This is a theological question, a very serious one. How could you punish if the God tells Avram, you are going to be enslaved by this nation, and then this nation does it? Did they do something wrong? Could you punish them?
Yes.
What do you mean? You the one that decreed that they should do it. So what do you want from them?
But they had a choice not to do it.
They did. If God said that they're going to do it, where was their choice?
It was ordered by God.
It was ordered by God. It was a decree. He said that this is going to happen. So they did it. And so how could you punish them? So there are a number of answers that are given to this question. She's not completely wrong, but you'll hear in a minute. One answer says that, let's take, for example, Weston. Yeah? If God says to me, today you're going to have a break-in in your house and someone's going to steal all your possessions. And then someone comes at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and breaks into my house and steals all my possessions. Is that person guilty?
Yes.
Why?
Because he stole.
He stole, but he was decreed by God. So what do you mean he stole? He was the messenger. He's there to fulfill what God said that's going to happen. The answer is he is guilty. Why? You're right, he's guilty. Why? Because God didn't say that he's going to do it. God said someone from Weston is going to steal from you. It has to be you.
It was forced.
There's a lot of people in Weston. You have to be the one?
No.
Let someone else. Why did you choose to be the messenger? God didn't say Moshe. He said a Westonite is going to steal from you today all your possessions.
You chose to.
So why did you have to be that Westonite? There's 70 other thousand Westonites that could have done it. Why do you have to be the one to do it? Oh, you chose to do it, you get punished. He never said that Moshe should do it. He said someone from Weston. You're the only Westonite. If you were the only person that lived in Weston, makes sense. Then you can say, I'm not guilty. There's only one person there. Hashem said that you're going to be the one. So then you have to be the one. But if there's 70 other thousand people there, he said one of those 70,000 is going to do it. Or even 20 of those 70,000.
Vice versa, you could have prevented it.
How
And
could
God
you have
would,
prevented it?
like in Jericho, the prostitute, she was somebody of bad character. And she did an exemplary deed to God's people. And she got blessed. Her family didn't get destroyed.
Not familiar. I don't remember.
In
that.
Jericho,
Yeah.
Rala, her name is. She protected those two.
Oh, Rachel.
So vice
that
versa,
story,
you
yeah.
could do a good deed in the middle of something bad.
No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about if God said, as a decree, this must happen. Someone must take all your possessions today from Weston. It doesn't have to be him. There's
Absolutely
enough other
not.
people that can do it. If you're the only person that lives here, then you can't be punished. But if there's thousands of others, you could be punished because you shouldn't have done it. Someone else could have done it. So the same thing is with the Egyptians. God didn't say that every Egyptian is going to become a taskmaster.
A murder.
He said the Jews will be enslaved in Egypt for 400 years. Did he say that every Egyptian is going to to torture the Jews? No. Every Egyptian could have said, it's not me. I don't have to be the one. Oh, they chose to be. They should be punished for that. But that only works, if you think about it, that answer why they should be punished, because they could have themselves said, we don't want to be part of this decree, let someone else from Egypt do it. That only works for the population of Egypt, but not for the king.
Oh, okay.
The king of Egypt, there's no way that the Jews could be enslaved if the king himself is not going to pass a rule that they should be enslaved. Because no one could do it if the king doesn't give permission, right? So how could God punish Pharaoh? The answer that we just gave, that there's so many others that could have done it, why did you have to be the one, works for the population. But for the king, why is he being punished? If God made a decree that the people of Egypt, that Egypt will enslave the Jewish people, by definition, the king is the one that has to make that happen. No one can do it if the king doesn't let. See, he has to pass the decree.
And why did he punish the Pharaoh?
So the question is, why was Pharaoh punished? All he was doing was fulfilling God's decree.
But he was evil.
He was evil. Of course he was evil.
That's a tough one.
So that's the question about Pharaoh. Why was Pharaoh punished? So the answer is that why did Pharaoh do it? Why did Pharaoh enslave the Jewish people? Do you think Pharaoh was got up one morning and said, a couple of 100 years ago, God told Abraham that his descendants have to be enslaved in a foreign nation, in Egypt. Mm-hmm. So I have to make that happen.
No.
You think that's what went through his mind?
No.
Why did he enslave the Jewish people? Because he was a Rasha. He was an evil person. He had bad character traits. He hated people. He was a bad person. That's why he did it.
Yeah.
He didn't do it because God said that this has to happen. In other words, he was a nice guy. And he is a fine person. And he loved the Jews. And he would have treated them nicely. But he heard that God said they must be enslaved, so he passed a decree that they should be enslaved. That's not what happened there. Why did he do it? Because he's bad character.
Wicked.
Because he was a wicked person.
Yes.
And when you're wicked, you get punished.
Yes.
God did punish them not because, in other words, this is extremely...
God is a lovely God.
No, it's extremely important to understand what happened over here. Do you think God was punishing Pharaoh because the Jews were tortured? No?
No.
He wasn't punished because the Jews were tortured, because the Jews were being tortured because of a decree from heaven. Mm-hmm. That had nothing to do with Pharaoh. If he wouldn't have done it, someone else would have done it. Mm-hmm. It would have happened. Mm-hmm. So God wasn't punishing him because of the result. He wasn't being punished because of the result. Because the result was God's decree. That had to happen. Right? So let's go back to the person in Weston. Right? That steals from me at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, in the example I gave before. So the person, that stealer, is going to be punished, right? Why is he being punished? Because I lost money? Because he took money away from me? No.
Exactly.
That was already decreed that I have to lose all my possessions that day.
It was meant to happen.
He was punished because he's a bad person, because his heart and his character, he's wicked. That's why he was punished. Not because I took a loss, because he made me lose money. God made me lose money. He's punished because he has a bad character. Because he never worked his character to become a good person. Because he's a wicked character. He has a wicked trait. That's why he's punished. Pharaoh's the same thing. He was punished not because the Jews were getting killed and the Jews were being tortured and the Jews were being enslaved. That was a decree from heaven. That had nothing to do with Pharaoh. That would have happened with him or without him. So he's not being punished because they took a loss. He's being punished because he's a wicked heart. He has a wicked heart. And when you have a wicked heart, you get punished. Now you see the connection between that and the bad weights?
Absolutely.
What's the problem with bad weights, with dishonest weights? It's not, we said before, this is not because you're causing that person a loss. That's theft. There's a lot of other mitzvahs that tell us you're not allowed to cause other people loss. The problem with the bad weights is not because you're stealing from someone else. The problem is because it represents a terribly flawed character within you. It's not the result that we're worried about. It's the cause. It's not the effect. It's the cause. I want you to understand that distinction. It's very important. God is not punishing the person that has bad weights because he caused a loss to someone else. Because as I said, the sin of weights is before you even use them. Even if you never caused someone else, if no one ever walked into your store, and you never sold anyone based on those weights, you never stole from anyone, you're still punished. You're not allowed to have such weights. Why? Because those weights represent your character. You're such a dishonest person. You're a two-faced person. You're showing honesty, but you're dishonest. You're showing honesty by showing, I have a weight. I'm not just selling you, by my own imagination. I'm weighing it. I'm making sure that you get what you deserve. But you're not. So it's the character, it's the flawed character that God is upset about, just like in Egypt. Why did he punish the Egyptians? Not because they caused the Jewish people harm. That wasn't why they were punished. Certainly not Pharaoh. He was punished because he was a bad person. Because he didn't do it to fulfill God's wish. He had no intention. He said, I don't even know God. He didn't even believe in God. He believed that he was a God.
Right.
So he did it because he was a bad person. So in other words, he was punished not because of the effect, but not because of the result, but because of the cause. Because of a bad heart, a terribly flawed character. And that's what this mitzvah is about. It's not about stealing. It's about our own character. What kind of person are you? And God looks at that. So a lot of people say, God judges me what I do, not what I feel. That's not always true.
The other way around.
God does look inside. And he wants to see what's going on in your heart. What kind of a person are you? Mm-hmm. Have you worked yourself through? Have you worked over your negative traits? A lot of people say, it's not important. As long as I'm a nice guy, I never hurt a fly. Mm-hmm. You ever heard that at a funeral? He never hurt a fly. That's not enough. What's in here?
And there's people who say, I didn't do it intentionally.
Jewish. That's a different thing. If someone didn't do it intentionally, that's something else.
That's different,
That's
right?
a mistake. Okay, that's different. But we're not even talking about doing. We're talking about before he does anything. We're talking about where's your mind and heart? Not where are your hands and feet. We're not talking about hands and feet right now. We're talking about heart and mind. Where is your character? What kind of a person are you?
Yeah, that's why some people
that's
say,
extremely
I'm
important.
From the heart,
Huh?
Some people say, I'm speaking from the heart.
Yeah.
But your actions are more than your words.
You're right. When it comes in the final analysis, we measure our actions more than anything else, but it's not enough. If someone has a very, very flawed character, he has to work it out. He has to make it better.
I think we all do, Rabbi.
Good. We do is good. That's very good. But that's it's not enough what you do. This mitzvah is a very, very powerful mitzvah.
It is.
This mitzvah is not about action. It's about thoughts. It's about character more than anything else. And that's why the Torah makes the correlation between this and Egypt. If you deny this, you're denying the whole story of Egypt. Because what happened in Egypt? Egypt was about character. It wasn't about the action of torturing the Jews. That's not why they were punished there. Because that was supposed to happen anyway. But over here it's even more. Over here the very act, the very making of a false weight shows what kind of corrupt person you are, even before you use it. Because you're ready, you're okay with showing the world that you are a decent, honest person by having weights. Look, I'm an honest, but you're so but in that alone
You're deceiving.
you're deceiving. And that's the problem. It's not that you're stealing. Stealing is bad enough, but that's not what this sin is. This sin is exactly the same as what happened in Egypt. In Egypt, the people were flawed at the core. They hated, they were so bad, and that's why they were punished.
Morning.
Morning. So this is people don't realize this. People, when they read this verse, they think it's another aspect of don't steal.
Right.
It's not.
Thank you.
It's about what's happening inside.
I never saw it that way.
Yeah, that's what it is, and that's why he makes the connection to Egypt. Only in this mitzvah, because stealing is a mitzvah not to steal. You know, it says lo ysignevu, you shouldn't steal. Also in this portion, you shouldn't steal. Why? What's the problem with stealing? Because over there you're causing harm to someone else. That's what that is about. Over here it's about you. Don't steal is about that other person. Don't have false weights. It's more about you. So it's a very, very important message here that the world says sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never harm. It's true. Words don't break your bones. But that's not a Jewish statement. Because you're right, even if you don't break someone's bones,
You can break their heart.
but even if you don't break the person's heart, even if you didn't say anything, if you have negative, ill feelings towards someone else, God it's very bad. God is looking at your character. It's not enough. I never did anything wrong, so I don't. What do you care how I feel? I care how you feel. It's very important to have a good character. You know, when you look for a shidduch, you look for a match for your son or daughter. First thing you have to look at what kind of character is that.
I pray.
What kind of character?
That's what I do.
Is this a good-hearted person?
Yes.
And not always do you measure how many favors did he do in the last year to people. It's not about that always, and that's important also. What is this person on the inside?
What is it all about?
What's this person on the inside? Not what he's on the outside. And the mitzvah of weights is about the person on the inside. That's why the Egyptians were punished, because they were corrupt on the inside, not so much on the outside. They were bad on the outside, but that's not why they were punished. Because that was already decreed from heaven that the Jews should be enslaved for 400 years. They couldn't help that. So if they wouldn't do it, someone else would do it. So it's not because they caused harm to the Jews. That's not why they were harmed. They were punished. They were punished because they were evil. That's why the connection between weights, and specifically weights, and Egypt. Because weights represents the absolute flawed character of a person. He's not just ready to steal. He's ready to steal, but he presents himself as being honest. That's even worse. So next week I promised you that we will we'll go about the whole future. Okay, sure.